Thank you, gentlelady. I'll now go to the chair of the Environmental Subcommittee, Mr. Johnson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Christie, in my subcommittee just last week, we examined the reliability impacts of proposed EPA regulations, and I want to kind of build on that this morning. In your testimony, you discussed the threat to reliability due to the rapid subtraction of dispatchable resources, especially coal and gas, with no replacement. You further discussed that 1 megawatt of wind or solar is simply not equal to 1 megawatt of gas, coal, or nuclear energy. I agree with that, by the way, but RTOs like PJM, which includes Ohio, have warned us about this. I am especially concerned about the public health impacts of system-wide outages. If you look at the EPA's own website, you look at the mission of the EPA on the White House's website, it's to protect public health and the environment. Public health is primary. So these outages, these potential outages resulting from taking dispatchable energy off the grid before anything can replace it can lead to loss of life in extreme heat and cold scenarios when folks in places like rural Appalachia don't have power. And it can result in negative impacts on nutrition when families, especially low-income families, can't cook their food because they can't power their kitchen appliances. You yourself characterized this situation as a, quote, serious threat to reliability that is looming on the horizon. So, Commissioner Christie, in your view, would you agree that current and proposed EPA power generation regulations are making this potential situation more precarious?
Yes, because they're going to drive up the cost of operating a coal generating unit. And if you drive up the cost, obviously that has to be paid for. Now, if the unit is in rate base, meaning in a vertically integrated state, well then consumers ultimately would have to pay the cost because cost for a unit that's in rate base, they get cost recovery through that mechanism. So that unit could potentially stay open with consumers paying the additional cost. If the unit is in one of our RTO markets and they're already at a point where they're not recovering their capital costs or their operating costs due to the market, then you add additional costs. It just makes them even less financially viable. So they'll close even sooner.
Okay. And would you agree, to avoid catastrophe, we need to work to preserve more of our reliable, dispatchable coal and gas-fired power?
That is exactly what NERC and the RTO management's been telling us. You can't just shut down your dispatchable generation overnight or within a matter of a few years and think that you can keep the lights on by simply trying to replace. And my point about the megawatt versus the megawatt is the capacity value of a wind or solar megawatt is simply not equal to the capacity value of a megawatt.
That's right.
Megawatt.
That's science. That's fact.
That's engineering. And it is engineering, and you can't keep the grid running with you don't get a one-for-one replacement. So
That's right.
The numbers don't add up. So
Well, what about the future? Renewables need to be backed up with something. Is there enough new gas-fired power planned to be built and integrated into our grid? Can you quickly touch on the current barriers to building out more gas-fired generation?
Well, you look at the PJM queue, what's called the queue, which is the line of units that want to get in and get interconnected. About 90% of it is wind, solar, or battery, and some other, I think some DR. And then it's only about 4%, I think, gas. So the problem is not only that are we getting enough new gas generation to provide backup to the increased deployment of wind and solar? The answer is no, we're not getting enough new. But the bigger problem is the gas units that we have increasingly can't get the fuel supply to run as either baseload units that run all the time or as peaker units that have to be called in on a, it's really a matter of supply. If they can't get the fuel supply, then they can't provide the power supply.
Okay. Let me go quickly to Commissioner Danley. I want to pivot to LNG exports. You wrote in September 2021, you discussed, and I quote, lingering apprehension that the Commission may not actually have authority to oversee the safety of liquefied natural gas, LNG facilities under Section 3 of the Natural Gas Act. And you noted that, quote, there is no language in the NGA that explicitly grants power to either the Commission or the Department of Energy to take responsibility for LNG safety. I'm concerned about duplication of efforts from multiple federal agencies here. And I know my time has run out. I'll ask this question, Commissioner Danley, and then if you would respond later in writing, that would be great. Can you share with our committee your perspective on FERC's authority for LNG safety and the cause of your apprehension? And are you still concerned about the Commission's interpretation of its authority? If you would get back to me on that question, I'd appreciate it.
Certainly, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.